All right. Good morning. Welcome to the PTNI's Daily Show. Happy Friday morning. Hope your morning is off to a great start. My name is Alan. I'm happy to be your host today. Currently have the pleasure of serving as the Chief Operating Officer here at ICE and a lead faculty in our Fitness Athlete division. We're here on the best darn day of the week. It's Fitness Athlete Friday. We talk all things CrossFit, powerlifting, Olympic weightlifting, endurance athletes, running, biking, swimming, triathletes, all that good stuff, and all of the data and topics related to those populations. Fitness Athlete Friday courses coming your way from the Fitness Athlete division over the next couple weeks. You can always find all of our courses at ptnice.com. We have a nice geo map for our live courses and our online courses as well. Next weekend, the weekend of February 4th and 5th, you can catch Joe down in Doral, Florida for Fitness Athlete Live. That's right outside of Miami. And then you can catch Fitness Athlete Advanced Concepts starting the last week of February 28th. That is our level 2 online course. You take essential foundations and then you get deeper into the weeds with CrossFit, Olympic weightlifting, powerlifting, advanced gymnastics, and a lot of programming and advanced concepts with Zach, Mitch, and Joe. That course is only run twice a year, a couple of slots left. So if you're looking to pursue our certificate in clinical management of fitness athlete, you need to take essential foundations, advanced concepts, and our live course. So if that's on your radar, make sure you jump into that course sooner rather than later. Today's topic, something near and dear to my heart, the idea of trying to use various tests to predict injury, and the idea of, is it possible to prevent injuries? With what we know about strength, stability, range of motion, is there a way we can try to figure out who is at more risk for injury, who's more likely to go on to be injured? And then can we retroactively work to do injury, quote unquote, prevention programs for these folks to try to reduce or quote unquote prevent injury? A topic very near and dear to my heart because I can't think of anything I hate more than the idea of saying that you can guarantee, you can say that we can prevent injuries, especially with using what are very low quality tests in the research. And we're going to talk a lot about that today. The first thing I want to talk about is the concept of movement screens. There's a lot of different ones. They're all pretty much worthless when we look at the research supporting their reliability, their validity, their transference to different populations, both general population, athletic. So we're going to start with that point. We're going to get into the application of how valuable is physical therapy in preventing, quote unquote, preventing injury or predicting who might be injured in the future. And then talking about what the research supports as far as what might actually work to perform the idea that we like here at ICE of reducing future injury risk. If we cannot prevent every single injury, what can we do in the gym? What can we do with patients and clients in therapy to reduce their risk for injury or help them work through one? What are those factors? So the first thing I want to do is talk about this paper that literally just came out a couple days ago, looking at trying to find out who is more likely to be injured. This paper, Assessing Injury Susceptibility at Marine Corps Recruit Depot, San Diego, California. This is a paper looking at Marine Corps boot camp recruits and using a number of different tests to try to figure out tracking people forward through the 13 weeks of Marine Corps boot camp, who, based on their pre-test results and post-test results, shakes out as somebody at increased likelihood for injury. So this paper used 3 different assessments. It used the functional movement screen, the FMS. It used the Y balance test, specifically the lower quarter portion of the Y balance test. And it looked at ankle dorsiflexion range of motion. And in this paper specifically, they were looking at soleus muscle length. They performed the half kneeling closed chain knee to wall test that we show in our fitness athlete courses, our extremity management courses, when we talk about assessing ankle mobility in a more functional way that we might see out in life with a bent knee, landing from a jump, squatting, that sort of thing. So this paper from Poe and colleagues, and I'll post these links on Instagram later. I know some of you always ask for the links. I I think you don't have access to the internet aside from Instagram. You're not able to find these papers on your own somehow. This article looked at about 407 Marine Corps recruits at the start of boot camp. If you don't know anything about Marine Corps boot camp, it's 13 weeks long. It's about 12 to 16 hours a day of pretty physical training, running, obstacle courses, marching, push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups, all that kind of stuff. About 6 days per week, usually Sundays off, and 6-ish hours of sleep a night, maybe. And here they measured these tests at the start of boot camp, and then they assess these Marine Corps recruits every week for the 13 weeks on a Tuesday. They found somewhat interesting results. They found that by using all of the testing combined, the FMS, the Y balance, and ankle dorsiflexion range of motion, that they were able to predict who might be more susceptible to an injury. But on their own, independently, these tests alone, the FMS on its own, the Y balance on its own, ankle dorsiflexion range of motion on its own, did not have any independent predictive value, which just kind of tells us what we already know. Movement is very complex, and so is injury, and we can't nail it down to just something like soleus range of motion. The issue with this paper that I have is that the injury incidence was very low. It was 3%. 12 people out of 407 got hurt in 13 weeks. 3 of those people had a fracture from falling from rappelling tower or obstacle course, right? So never have I seen somebody fall from 60 feet in the air and watch them break their femur and thought, if they had more ankle dorsiflexion range of motion, they wouldn't have fractured their femur just now, right? We know that's not true. So if we throw those 3 people out, we had 9 musculoskeletal injuries of non-traumatic origin, or about a 2.2% risk of injury. Incredibly low. We know CrossFit, Olympic weightlifting, powerlifting, all around 3 to 5%. We know running tends to be a little bit higher, but all things considered, 2.2% is quite low. So I have the question of, how low are we trying to get this? Are we trying to say that the only acceptable tolerance for injury is no injuries at all? And it's also important to keep in mind with papers like this, you might say, okay, great. If I do the FMS, Y balance, and or ankle dorsiflexion range of motion, I can see that if a person fails all 3 of those, they will go on to get injured in the future. And you simply can't do that, because in this study, they had complete control over these recruits, right? If you haven't been to Marine Corps boot camp or Army basic training, don't go now. Don't start now. It's a miserable experience. They have total control over you, of when you exercise, of what you eat, of when you sleep. They can tell down to the calorie, how much food they've given you that day. So this is, all things considered, a good paper in that they had full control over all of the subjects. When we look at folks who come into our gym or come into our clinic, we don't have that control. We don't have control over how much people sleep, what they put into their bodies, what other exercise they might do outside of what we know they're already doing. If we know we're coaching them in CrossFit or they're running or something like that, there's simply too many variables for the regular person out in society to take these tests and apply it to the general population and say, look, if we do all of these tests and they fail, we know that they're probably going to go on to have an injury and we need to do some sort of intervention. Movement and injury are much more complex than that. Moving to another paper, and I'll just stop here and declare my bias that I absolutely hate the functional movement screen. It's such a wonky test. A lot of my bias comes from being a student at a clinic where we charged $200 cash to every patient to do the FMS, and then if they failed it, we told them that they needed to stop their exercise program and start physical therapy with us. It was just really, it was really scammy. And I pulled this review from a clinic website from a patient regarding the FMS, and I just want to read it, and you'll kind of get that same gross feeling deep down in your spine. I've been doing CrossFit for 6 months, but felt like I was missing something. My wife told me about FMS testing back before I started, but I didn't listen. I'm so glad I finally came into clinic name removed physical therapy for this screen and learned about my areas of weakness. They told me I should stop CrossFit and begin one-on-one training with them in their sports performance program, and it has been life-altering. Thanks for your help. Oh, I can't think of anything worse than using a movement screen that has been defeated in the research over and over again to tell somebody to stop exercising. What a big fail, right? How terrible is that? So again, I am very biased against any screen like this that is used to stop people from exercising, especially if they're already exercising, right? We already have enough barriers. Only 11% of people exercise on a regular basis. We don't need any more barriers like this to get in people's way, okay? So now let's move to another great paper. If you haven't read this paper, this is a paper you should read in full. It's quite chunky. Randomized controlled trial of general strength conditioning versus motor control and manual therapy for chronic low back pain on physical and self-reported outcomes. It's a paper from 2020 from Tagliafieri and colleagues. It is a very robust paper. It has some very well done methodology. It is very worth your time to read the whole paper and just get a whole appreciation for how well done it is and how dangerous research like this is to physical therapy. This paper is essentially comparing going to the gym for 6 months or physical therapy. We'll talk about it in detail here, but the too long didn't read is that going to the gym beats physical therapy, which is not papers that we want to see come out, right? That's bad for business, but nonetheless, we need to talk about them because they're very important. So this paper took subjects aged 25 to 45, all who had non-specific chronic low back pain. So they had back pain of at least 3 months in origin, in duration. They had pain somewhere between T12 and the bottom of their gluteal fold. So they had some sort of back pain. Varying intensity, 2 to 8 out of 10 in intensity. And the main exclusion criteria here was they were not already exercising for 150 minutes or more per week. So these were people, chronic low back pain, longer duration, fairly high in intensity, and folks who were not meeting the minimum exercise standards. They randomized these folks into one control group and 2 experimental groups. The experimental groups went 2 very divergent ways. They had a general strength and conditioning group that went to the gym, and they had another group that went to physical therapy appointments, traditional physical therapy appointments. The gym group did 2 sessions of 1 hour a week at their local YMCA with a trainer for the first 3 months, and then added 1 to 2 additional sessions in the back half of the study, months 3 through 6. The protocol was very standardized: 20 minutes of aerobic conditioning at 65 to 85% of heart rate max, so a moderate to vigorous intensity. And they performed resistance training as well on the days they went to the gym, and they performed functional movement. They performed deadlifts, squats, bench press. They performed horizontal pulling like bent over rows, barbell, dumbbell, cable. They performed hip extension based exercises like barbell hip thrusts, and they did trunk flexion and extension exercises like planks, resisted curl ups, that sort of stuff. So they kind of did like some major compound lifts and some accessory work. If you're used to bodybuilding or powerlifting or Olympic weightlifting, that looks like a normal training session for you. These folks progressed on a time-oriented basis, which means they had their load progressed based on the idea that across 6 months, they would continue to get stronger. Their pain was not taken into consideration. It didn't matter if their pain got better, got worse, didn't change. They continued to have their weights progressed as they got stronger across the 6-month period. So the emphasis here was on improving these patients, these subjects' strength, hypertrophy, and endurance. And again, the goal here was to meet that minimum exercise standard of some combination of cardiovascular conditioning and resistance training, kind of those CDC guidelines that we like to talk about. The PT group focused on motor control and manual therapy. So these folks in the first 3 months went to 10 appointments of 30 minutes of physical therapy. And then sometime in the back half of the study, months 3 through 6, had 2 additional 30-minute appointments of physical therapy as needed. So think of those as like a tune-up or a maintenance visit, and they chose when to take those visits or not to take them at all. In physical therapy, they did some mind-blowing functional stuff. They did the spinal stability program, right? Lay on your back, bring your knees to your chest, bent knee fallouts, trunk rotations, pull your belly button to your spine, tuck your testicles, the kind of spinal stability stuff that we're used to seeing. They followed that protocol. They also got manual therapy. Here, the manual therapy was lumbar A to P mobilizations, so no thrust, and then lumbar soft tissue work, although they did not really describe what they did, if they just did massage, if they did cupping, if they did scraping, instrument assisted. They didn't really talk about what those soft tissue techniques were, just that all of this happened inside of that 30-minute window. Results. Both groups had similar pain reduction at 6 months, and that's where the equivalencies end. The general strength conditioning group had greater improvements in trunk extension, trunk flexion, leg endurance, greater improvements in one rep max leg press, greater improvements in their VO2 max, greater improvements in self reported levels of disability via the oswestry, quality of life via the SF36, and probably arguably most importantly, significantly reduced levels of kinesiophobia, fear of movement due to their back pain, as rated by the Tampa scale. So the general strength conditioning group blew the PT group out of the water. Now, a lot of folks are going to say pain was the same. Alan, that's all we do. We just fix pain. Fix pain, move them out. Fix pain, move them out. Who cares? It's all the same. That's really time efficient to have those folks come in for 30 minutes, tuck their testicles towards their spine, get a little rub down, and move on out. If the pain's the same, why do we matter? The answer is I would really want to see this study and look at these subjects carried forward. What do these folks look like at 1 year, 3 year, 5 years? What do these folks look like at 20 years? That improvement, that bump in strength and VO2 max via cardiorespiratory fitness, how far did that carry people health wise? How did the folks in the PT group shake out in the future with things like blood pressure and high blood sugar? How did the cardiometabolic factors change over time in these groups? And it wasn't studied, so we can't really carry it forward and try to follow up with these folks. But that's the kind of stuff we want to see from our research. So this research would say just going to the gym and working out can be really beneficial to reducing pain. So if we aren't able to predict pain with our movement screens, and if pain can be reduced by exercising, then is there a way to see, can we possibly reduce the risk of injury in the future? And in comes the last study that we're going to talk about. Another favorite paper of mine, Case 2020 and colleagues, barbell squat relative strength is an identifier for lower extremity injury in collegiate athletes. So what can we do with people? If we can't look at their FMS, if we can't look at their Y balance, if assessing their ankle dorsiflexion range of motion does not matter, what can we do? We can do the most basic thing possible, which is to get them exercising and in particular, get them strong. This paper from Case and colleagues looked at barbell back squat strength relative to body weight and looked at who was more likely to develop a lower extremity injury in the future. And surprising to no one who cares about this line of research, the folks with stronger back squats were less likely to have a lower extremity injury moving forward in their sports season. So in particular, men who were able to back squat their body weight or more, so a 200-pound man who can back squat 200 pounds or more, or women who could back squat 75% more of their body weight, were the least likely to go on to develop a lower extremity injury. So we know strength seems to be the main characteristic that can reduce the likelihood of future injury. We had a paper come out literally yesterday, Gagnon and colleagues, 2023, looking at a very similar relationship in baseball pitchers, looking at eccentric external rotation strength and pitch count, and finding that those folks who came into the study with stronger external rotation eccentric strength, they were able to produce basically a lack of change in pre-practice to post-practice strength change. That is, that after throwing a bunch of baseballs, testing their strength again, their strength did not decline, versus the weaker athletes in the study had a significant drop off. Their tissue was much more challenged, and they had basically over-challenged their capacity due to their weakness coming into the study. So again, stronger folks have greater capacity. It becomes tougher to bump into that capacity the stronger you are. They can withstand higher levels of physical demand on their capacity than weaker people. So all that to say, what can we do? Well, we know we can focus on getting people strong, whether they have no injury, whether they have an active injury, whether they are thinking about surgery, whether they've already had surgery. It doesn't really matter where your patient comes in and falls on a continuum. We need to focus on getting them stronger in a way that translates to whatever they're doing. If they're a throwing athlete, we need to work on external rotation strength. If they're a lower extremity athlete that's using your legs a lot, like a volleyball athlete or a football athlete, we know we probably need to be squatting and deadlifting. General population folks are great because they essentially have no fitness goals. So we can work on anything and they're going to get better, right? We can bump the needle in a lot of different domains. So I'll end with saying, Stop using arbitrary tests that are not supported by the evidence to try to gatekeep movement from people. We need to be movement optimists. When Mitch and I teach Essential Foundations online, a lot of folks say, Mitch, Alan, you guys coach CrossFit more than you treat patients now. Surely all of this movement you're coaching, you must be pretty hardline on seeing really solid movement mechanics. You must be movement Nazis, right? And the answer is no. The importance of getting people in the gym and keeping them moving is the most important thing. Once somebody's in the gym, we can meet them where they're at. Once they come to see us for physical therapy, we can meet them where they're at. You don't need to be a perfect mover to get better at moving. That wouldn't make sense, right? Then nobody would do it. It's like the idea of folks who believe they need to go work out somewhere else to get in shape for CrossFit. CrossFit is designed to get you in shape. Just get in here. We can meet you where you're at and get you better. We can improve your range of motion, improve your strength, reduce your risk of comorbidities, all that good jazz. But we have to get you moving first. And we need to do whatever we can to reduce the barriers to getting people moving. At the end of the day, these little movement tests don't translate to sport. They've been defeated time and time again in the literature transferring to sport. There's actually a study that shows folks who failed the FMS were better golfers than folks who passed it. I love that study so much. It's a fantastic study. But that stuff doesn't translate to sport, and it definitely doesn't translate to real life, right? I was in DC a couple years ago, I think 2018. Mitch and I were teaching. We got in early on Friday. We rented some bikes. We were riding bikes around town, looking at all the landmarks and just being tourists. And this bus came over, it merged. It did not care that we were there on the side of the road. It was merging over to stop at a bus stop. And right in front of me, I thought I was going to watch Mitch get pinned by a bus. And in that moment, what I did not think was, if Mitch had more ankle dorsiflexion range of motion right now, he would be at less of a risk of getting crushed by this bus, right? That doesn't happen, right? This stuff is meaningless. It doesn't apply to real life. It doesn't apply to sport. So stop using it. If you're using the FMS, if you're charging people to take it, if you're saying you failed this, you shouldn't be exercising, shame on you, stop. I fail the FMS, right? I would get a score of 12. I gave myself the FMS in preparation for this podcast. I failed it. A score of 13 or lower means you're at increased risk of injury, and you should be evaluated before you begin an exercise program, or possibly discontinue your current exercise program and work on your FMS weaknesses before you begin again. I can strict press my body weight. I can bench press 150% my body weight. I can squat twice my body weight. I'm working on a 3 times body weight deadlift. I can double under, I can run, I can row, I can pull up, I can muscle up, I can toe to bar, I can handstand push up. I'll probably never be able to pistol squat, but I've made peace with that, right? Why would you tell somebody like me who failed the FMS to stop doing exercise and try to get better at all of the things on the FMS? That makes no sense. So we need to let it go out of our mind that we can have just one test that applies to everybody, where we can say, hey, you're in trouble. You need to come into PT. I don't like where this is going. Your movement isn't that great. You're probably going to get injured. The research would say that you're wrong. Practical application would say that you're wrong. So let's knock it off. Let's get people in our doors, into the clinic, into the gym, find a way to get them moving, find a way to get their heart rate up, find a way to get them moving some weight around. They're going to feel better. They will start to move better. I promise you, their motion will get better. Their form will get better. They just need some time and some patience and some positive encouragement from us. So be a movement optimist. Stop trying to worry about how we can predict and prevent injury in every single person, and just get people moving instead. So I hope you have a fantastic Friday. Hope you have a wonderful weekend. If you're going to be at a live course, enjoy yourselves. We'll see you all next time. Have a great weekend. Have a great Friday. Bye, everybody.